Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Brass Junkies. I am joined by a former multi-appearance guest, but a first-time co-host,
Amazing.
Doc Nickens. How are you?
It's a promotion that I feel honored and have been just always kind of hoping, and then here we are.
I don't know where there is to ascend to from here. Maybe naming it like the Michael W. Nickens, F. Nickens, F W. Yeah, there it is. I was like,
with the F,
blues and F. That's right. I just got the F from.
Or grades and classes that I've gotten over the years, or.
That's really funny. I've performed Doc's blues and F for unaccompanied tuba many times. Recorded it on an album, and I remember that the middle initial had significance, and so then I was like, I think it's W. Wait, it's F.
W.
Yeah, I know it's not Q. Yeah. Anyway,
my mother's family name is West, and
that's of course.
So I love keeping it there to honor her and them. And
yeah, speaking of your mother, the meme that you posted the other day of the iced tea with the ice cubes,
man, and Mr. T
yes.
as the
tea bag, and his mother had a hilarious like, oh geez, like reaction, which the whole thing was great. So what an interview that we just had, a conversation with Marcus Grant. I mean,
my impression is his fluency, his preparedness, and then just his natural flow. Oh boy, the progress of just having him in the world is going to intimidate some people who need to be intimidated, because it's just he's the real deal. He is the total package. He is, oh my goodness,
he's special. Yeah, he is special. Yeah, as you hear right away, he just what he says, how he says it. Is just just wonderful, and a great composer, a great trumpet player. I mean, that's why we had him on. But then, it's obvious that he's thought about a lot of stuff and is really good at explaining it in a way that's easy to digest. So, really, this was special. So,
agreed.
Speaking of special, I want to thank Parker Mouthpieces for providing the hosting for the Brass Junkies. Parker Mouthpieces offers fine and special customizable component mouthpieces for horn, trombone, euphonium, and tuba, including the Andrew Hitz Artist Model tuba mouthpiece, which I don't think would work on a horn, a trombone, or euphonium. It probably wouldn't fit, but it works on the tuba quite well. I've got one right over there. You can find out more at parkermouthpieces.com or follow them on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And I want to we talk about this in the episode, of course, but I wanted to point out that Marcus is currently having a consortium, which the deadline for which is September 10th. If you go to msgrantmusic.com, this consortium, this is the first brass quintet that he has ever written, and it's being headlined. The consortium is being led by Seraph Brass, of course, the incredible quintet. And so, if you want to help support him, there is time. There's going to be about a week after this gets released, week and a half. So, and if you're hearing this in the future, I think this one's going to be a popular one because of how just again, This was I'm going to be thinking about this one for a long time. So I'm guessing that this one's going to get shared a lot. In spite of Doc and my efforts as the host, but anyway, go buy the piece. So, and there's a sample up there too, which you should go check out. msgrantmusic.com, and if you go and click on consortium, you can hear a small clip from it, and it sounds really cool. So. And I just want to thank everybody who continues to support the Brass Junkies. There's a new website, brassjunkies.com. Please go check that out. And without further ado, let us get to the conversation that
here we go.
Doc Nickens and I had with trumpet player and composer Marcus Grant. And today on the Brass Junkies, we are joined by a trumpet player, a composer, a teacher, a Renaissance man, really, and who is also here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, although we are in, all three of us are in different places. But we are here with Marcus Grant. Marcus, how are you?
I'm wonderful. It's a pleasure to be here. I hopefully you don't hold it against me that I'm a trumpet player. I've
Well,
had a fun career though. It's been great.
We'll wait till we're on the bandstand to do that.
yeah. You're one of those nice ones, which most of them are. But I when it's 2023, I think I'm allowed to to ignore evidence that doesn't fit my argument. You just you're like, oh no, look at it. Yeah, that guy's a jerk. Yeah, so they all are. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And if you say it on the internet, it becomes true. So just as long as you say it once, it has to be true. So yeah,
See,
all you need is one person somewhere to say, "Oh, he's a jerk," and then that's all that matters.
then I'm in trouble. So let's talk a little bit about your journey. I'm assuming that you were a trumpet player before you were a composer, correct?
Um, Not quite, actually.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So
This is
of
cool.
course, I mean, I moved. I was a lot more diligent with my career, pursuing as a trumpet player and
Mhm.
composing. Kind of just, it was always a part of my passion. And I mean,
That's great.
you guys know this. We all know this. Sometimes when you spend an inordinate amount of hours towards perfecting a passion, it doesn't always feel like a passion. And so composing was sometimes a way to get away from the tough practice room times. But I found myself just playing around with music when I was in elementary school. I wanted to be an inventor, and so in a way, when I became passionate with music, it started to become an inventor of music type of thing.
Hmm.
So I actually ended up playing around with that. 8, 9, 10. I mean, of course, my music sounded terrible, right? Which we can, of course, talk about. I mean, because people outside of music seem to think that musicians are just gifted and born and that they're prodigies, and that because they don't see all the hours that come in. And composing is it's the same thing. Of course, I was not born hearing symphonies in my head. That's not a thing that happens. I went from writing horrible music to writing less horrible music, and hopefully that process continues. But it started at a young enough age where I was not so self-conscious about coming up short. And I think that's one of the important aspects that helped to get me to where I am today.
Wow, that was I I made an assumption because I knew you as a trumpet player before I knew you as a composer, but
Yeah.
what you just said, that 90 seconds, that was if you, and you're going to offer plenty, if you offered nothing else for the entire rest of this interview, that's gold. I mean, what
Wrap it
you
up.
That's
just
very kind of you.
yeah.
Thank you.
No, yeah, wrap it up. The yeah, that's gold because you said that you started young enough that you were okay with coming up short, and that's still possible when you start things at a later age. It's just harder, right? And no
Yeah.
baby gets mad that they're trying to walk and they keep falling over. They never get frustrated. They just
Yeah.
stand
No,
up.
no baby just goes, "Oh, I fell twice. It's not for me. Let me try something else."
I'm never gonna walk.
Yeah.
And when you are, less than 3 feet tall and only weigh, whatever, 40 pounds most, the fall isn't as much. The fall doesn't hit you the same kind of way, right?
Yeah.
And I'm really interested in that also because of that early part. All of us went through it, when we were at a certain young part of our journey. There was no expectation. The expectation was that everyone's just kind of equally not doing anything. And then so anybody that actually does something stands out. Look at this kid trying, achieving whatever it is. And then, right, it does kind of turn on us at a certain point where not only is achieving the expectation, but we're being funneled to think that only the top performer is the successful one, and everybody else is not particularly thinking about trying to win a performance gig or something like that.
Yeah.
Composing, well, you speak about it. What about making space for yourself as a composer versus trying to make it within all the larger systems that were already in place when you started?
Sure. Well, I was lucky enough to learn at a early enough stage in my career that as long as I didn't quit, that it was impossible to fail. And I think a lot of
Bravo.
people we don't always we underestimate the value of volume, and then that's reinforced in conversations like quality versus quantity and those types of things. No one ever asks, like, why not both? Like, in order to be a musician, you need both. You can't just have a really great practice session and then, oh, great, now I'm a professional. It doesn't work that way.
Mhm.
You also can't sit down and, especially now with a brass instrument, play until your face starts bleeding and then expect that, do that every single day, and then you'll be great. At some point, there's a diminishing returns. So I was able to, I had great teachers. I had great, I had a strong supportive family, and I was just really lucky to be in an environment that was conducive to having that understanding. So there was a really long period of time where I just wrote music because I enjoyed it, and people. Sometimes I'd be made fun of for it, sometimes I'd be told, oh yeah, like this is cool, but I mean, this is never really going to be a thing, right? Like, the get a real job thing that you hear oftentimes as musicians, like do something that's going to pay your bills, with the assumption that it just would, I mean, similar to playing the trumpet, or to being a teacher, I've put thousands and thousands and thousands of hours towards writing music. And at the end of the day, that's what helped me to understand how to do it in a way that is efficient and effective. And I mean, once you do that, it's just a matter of being able to share that with people. And over time, again, like the volume, in this case, volume of sharing allows people to recognize, most importantly, that you care about the craft and that you care about serving other people in the craft. But then, of course, among that comes that, oh, maybe you actually write a good piece here and there that people actually want to play. And so that's been a really meaningful process to me. I know it's worth bringing this into the interview, but the talk of like, there's many people can write music, and I would add play an instrument and not really say something. That's what you were saying, Andrew, before we started recording here.
Yeah.
It's a phenomenon. Like, we work so hard on perfecting the craft, but why? What's the overall point? Why would I want to become a professional trumpet player? Well, so that I can make music. If there's a statement that needs to be said, I want to have no boundaries that are going to stop me from being able to do that. And as a composer, that's kind of the way that I went about that. People notice that, they notice when you're trying to do something meaningful, and they're willing to embrace that.
Oh man. That last soundbite, if you didn't say the first soundbite and you said nothing else the entire rest of the interview with value, that was gold. Yeah, I'm serious.
Maybe it's my experience as a content creator. I don't know.
That was, but it's, yes. Yeah, actually you make a good point there, because it's, yes, it is how you're saying it, but it's mainly just the message is so empowering, and yes, I'm glad that you brought that up, because we were chatting, of course, before, as I always do with guests, before we start rolling. And I would say this is going to be a little bit harsh, but the average like master's or doctoral tuba student at like a good program in the US can operate the hell out of a tuba. Like, I mean, that level is like, it's like light years ahead of where it was 30 years ago when I was coming through. However, I think I can say most, which is 51%, right? Like not 99%, but I would say that most, it feels like the main headline is operating the tuba at a really high level, and there's not really a burning like message, at least, that's coming through to me. And that's actually more of a criticism of the system than of their playing. But your writing, Doc's writing, I try. I don't know if I succeed, but I try with my playing. Is to have a message, is to have an opinion, is to have a take, and that means that some people don't like it and some people do. How do you respond to people when you get criticism of your music?
I try to find out where it's coming from. Sometimes, most of the time, at least in my career thus far, it's from a place of care, and there's at least some sort of truth towards their perspective. So I try to listen and see what it is about that perspective, and if it really can help me grow. I have had some people just say hateful things just to be hateful, and I in those cases, I know it's as human beings, we're looking for attention, we're looking for value, we're looking for people to acknowledge us, and at some point in this interview, we'll stop having deep conversations. But what I've learned is like acknowledging those individuals for the positive things that they do helps to stop them to do the negatives. Because I mean, oftentimes in the world we do things because we're looking for attention, and when we do good things and we see it in the world as an expectation, that means it becomes ignored and people become invisible. And so how do they become visible? Well, it's by being hateful, which is a solution to attention, but not really a solution to much of anything else. So as long as I understand, like if somebody comes to me and they're hateful for the case of being hateful, it's because they think I have some sort of value and that they want, whatever attention I have to bring to them, which, that's when you think of it that way, it acknowledges the fact that you are making an impact, which is a good thing. So then you can take that impact and turn it around. And I've found that a lot of people, come to respect and appreciate that. There are people who, when they first met me, they decided that they were just going to hate me for whatever reason. And I said, oh, okay, well, that's not the game I play, so I'm not going to do that to you. And then we became friends afterwards. So yeah, I mean, I have had some instances where people just, they just want to be rude and mean. And if that's the case, then I, the tough love type of thing, but I don't have time for that in my life. We mostly, if nothing else, because we are the sum of the people that we hang around, and I don't ever want to become that type of person.
Wow. I once had a mentor tell me a one-liner that I will remember until I take my last breath, which was, he said, I find it fascinating that I no longer have to attend to every argument I'm invited to.
Yeah.
I was like,
spot
right?
on.
That's powerful.
Which is what you just said, right?
Yeah.
When you said that's not the game I play. I was like, oh yeah, that but this person was you're sharing perspective of like their people are supposed to get in their like 60s, 70s,
Thank you.
What are you 31, 32, something like that?
I'm exactly 31.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So yeah, you're inappropriately worldly here. Yeah, you should maybe check that a little bit. So that's great.
I'm sorry. I promise I'll be less mature for the rest of the
He's genuine about it too. I like to call myself doing that sometimes, but what I find I'm actually doing is just declawing the person. I am absolutely trying to win the fight, but I'm doing it. Like, no, we don't need to fight. I won.
Yeah.
It's not a competition, but I'm first place. Just so you know.
Jose Sabaha has a friend in Miami who was once playing a big band gig, and one of the his buddy was playing lead. The guy that was second when they packed up, this guy who was second is like, I guess, infamous for not having the best attitude. And he walked up to the guy who had been playing first, and he said to him, he said, "You sound good, but I sound good too." And then he walked away. It's like, obviously the cat sounded so good that he felt like obligated to acknowledge it, but then he was like, but me too. Yeah. And then I love that. Not a competition, but I'm in first place. That's good. Do you have a system for composing? Like, do you know the next time that you compose is going to be Monday morning at 9:30 a.m., or do you wait to be inspired, or is it a combination of the two?
It's a combination of the two. I find that a lot of the best inspiration comes on a schedule, which sounds contradictory, but it's one of those things where you sit down and you go, okay, cool. This is the goal that I need to look for, and what, how am I going to go about that process? And to be honest, most of it comes from, most obviously when you do gigs with individuals, there are deadlines involved, so you can't just say, oh, don't, can't rush art. Like, that's not something that flies when you, for example, write for a wind band that has a concert date. You can't just do things like that. But what I find is, like, when I sit down in those instances, I have the opportunity to reflect on what it is about that project that is meaningful, and it takes some time to be able to collect yourself to be in the position where you're able to do that successfully. I've had projects where I haven't done that and it hasn't gone too well, but you have the opportunity to sit and just devote specific time towards saying, why is this meaningful to me, and what am I actually really doing with this? And that can happen on a schedule. That being said, the inspiration I get for the music happens everywhere. It very rarely happens when I'm actually sitting down looking at a score, writing notes down. It usually happens when I walk away from it and I'm out on a walk in the neighborhood, or taking a shower, or teaching my students, or whatever, anywhere where you can't put it down. And I actually have a lot of recordings. The number one way that I kind of retain the ideas that come into my mind is that I take out my cell phone and I literally just press record, and then I sing into it. And oftentimes sometimes it's melodies, sometimes it's themes and rhythmic, ostinatos, or whatever the case may be. So sometimes it might be me actually singing into the phone. Sometimes it's me, doing something that if I were to put on the internet will probably go viral because of how silly it is. But those things allow me to bring the inspiration back when I'm sitting down and saying, all right, now it's time to put forth, whatever it is to put forth at whatever time it is. So the inspiration comes spontaneously everywhere. But it becomes because you've taken the time to sit and prepare yourself mentally and invite that inspiration to come in.
I absolutely do that cell phone thing. I liken it to having a very meaningful dream that you can't remember when you wake up. And so that's sort of that thing that kind of stops that deterioration of it, because in the moment you're in it, and then you don't have the time or the space or something to either literally write it down or spend more time with it. But being able to go back to it, as long as you remember to go back to
it. Well, that's an entirely different conversation. Yeah.
Are either of you familiar with a podcast, Song Exploder?
I'm not.
I have, but I haven't. Yeah.
It's a fascinating podcast where it will take an artist and they will interview them about how they wrote one specific song.
I love it.
And there's an album by Vampire Weekend from like 2019 maybe called Father of the Bride, which is just this unbelievable, it's an incredible album. There's a song Harmony Hall, which anyone who knows that song is now hearing it in their head. That's how catchy it is. But the Ezra Koenig, the lead of Vampire Weekend, he talks about how he wrote that song, and that album. No, I think it was their previous album that won like Grammy for Album of the Year. But he has a couple of voice memos that he actually plays on the show that you can like hear, and he talks through how there were all these pieces in it. Yeah, it's really, I cannot recommend. I'll put that in the show notes. I cannot recommend that podcast any more highly, and it's like from everything from hip hop to pop to like to everything. So
thank you.
That's great. Yeah,
sounds amazing.
Yeah. Yep. So that's can you talk a little bit more about being on a deadline? Because that to me, like for a composer, was something that like you can't just like. I would imagine that if you're not in the right headspace, that it's a little bit like what's the movie where they say like the beatings will continue until morale improves, right? Or you just like if you're just like screaming at yourself like you must be creative by Thursday, it's like it doesn't feel like that would get me there. So how do you deal with like an aggressive deadline?
Well, it's tough to say because, to be honest, I'm still trying to figure that out myself, and I've had instances, especially, I mean, I've had recent experiences where I've missed deadlines, and there's an opportunity cost that is associated with that, and sometimes it can sting. If nothing else, the remembrance of what is at stake, I guess, for lack of a better term, if you don't meet a deadline is something that can motivate you to meet said deadline. But a lot of times what I found, and this is something I need to be just way better at, and anyone who has been my recent client in commissioning and consortiums will probably tell you this, is that I just need to get more comfortable with telling people when it's not where I want it to be, and helping and as we work together to get to the goal that we're both looking for, and to do that early. Usually what happens, and I mean, I don't know, I can tell you from my experience, at least, as a composer, usually what happens is I feel the pressure that every time I do something and it is received well, there's a larger amount of pressure to do something that's received well next time. And when you go through that process, and it's kind of a, I mean, it's a normal thing to go through, but when you step outside of the situation, you understand like people like who you are because you are who you are. So just be genuine. But it's hard to tell yourself that when you're in that, you know, when you're in that funk and you're like, I'm not happy with what's in front of me. In the cases where I have been able to salvage deadlines, it is usually because I communicated with the individual who I thought would absolutely hate everything that I put forth, and they turns out that they didn't, and it's always a surprise to me. I don't know why. It's just, you know, sometimes you can get in your head, and I think we do this as performers as well. I mean, I know I gave a few trumpet recitals at VCU, Rex Richardson, of course, being my teacher, where I walked off the stage going, I bet everybody hates me and everybody's going to make fun of me. And then people go, oh, that sounds great. Okay, what are you talking about? I mean, thanks. Yeah, of course. It was that according to plan. But that happens a lot as a composer. That kind of gets in my head. So if I were to struggle with deadlines, it's usually because of that. I find that I have a lot of success rectifying that if I'm actively working with the individual who gave the deadline, or for whom we agreed on what that deadline is.
In your answer, it seems like you revealed a couple things. One being that the receiver of the commission, right, the person who's going to be performing or facilitating the performance, in some respects, the musicians just want music to play, and they don't really know much about you, but the notation allows for them to have some sort of journey experience, whatever. And then there's kind of the other side of what you said, which is they just want to interact with you. And so it is possible that your output has ups and downs in terms of, you know, the elusive inspiration, or the, you know, we always say we want something meaningful or something like that, moving. But it's like they can be moving for lots of reasons, not just the piece by itself, but within a larger context. And consider that, you know, this commission, and, you know, this sounds could sound a little bit cynical, but I don't think so. It's like there's a retainer for just continuing your career as a composer, and so we need to keep you working so that you will continue working. And maybe we can just accept that not everything's going to be the number one best thing you did, but all of it's going to lead to something. It's like maybe this piece is just a brick in a bigger wall that's coming later, you know. Anyway, I just heard that there, and it felt like it was worth articulating.
Yeah, absolutely. I find as well, I mean, just the audience of music is big enough that someone's going to value what you do too. And I have to remind myself that as well. You know, there have been sections of pieces, I'll say it this way, that I'm like, man, I wish that transition was better, where people have specifically said that's the greatest transition I've ever heard, to go from one part to another part. Really?
Not always the best judge of our own stuff.
Yeah,
not always the best judge.
Yeah, it's that whole beauty is in the eye of the beholder type of thing, you know. And of course we want to be happy with the product that we put out there, because it's going to represent us. But also, you know, the way that people perceive that is a big part of it as well. And it's not just writing music, but it's your brand as a whole, you know. If you're a jerk who writes good music, versus if you're not a jerk who writes good music, you know, the same quality music will be perceived significantly higher because you were fun to work with, you were trustworthy, and because they believe in your ability to make an impact.
Oh, it's a great message. That's a great message.
Agreed.
Two things that I wanted to share super quickly, and then I wanted to talk about this consortium. Speaking of deadlines, yeah, you're like, yeah, actually, can this be the last question? I got to go compose. First of all, Elizabeth Gilbert, who was the author of Eat, Pray, Love, which of course became a movie. You know, she wrote a book called Big Magic, which I cannot recommend any more highly to any creative. And she talks very openly and honestly in there about how, like, she has had to grapple with the fact that, like, the work that is going to have the greatest impact on the world is almost surely in her rearview mirror, right? Like, she's never going to have a bigger hit than Eat, Pray, Love, which starred Julia Roberts on the big screen. And so she's kind of like had to, like, just, you know, dealing with like the I'm very much paraphrasing now, but like the emotional, like, you know, realization that her best work is behind her, and yet still a lot to say. That's really great. And then talking about inspiration, one of my favorite quotes about inspiration, probably my favorite quote, is by this author named W. Somerset Maugham, who was this like big author back in like the 20s, 30s, 40s. Like I think was like the biggest author in the world. He once said, "I write only when inspiration strikes. Fortunately, it strikes every morning at 9 o'clock sharp." Which is like, yeah, which is just like, yeah, which is really great. So I wanted to take just a moment before talking about this this consortium that I'm really excited to have become a thing. But I wanted to talk about Duquesne University and the Mary Pappert School of Music, which I'm also excited that that is a thing. I actually did a masterclass there and heard some people play back in the spring when I was in Pittsburgh, and the level of players and of teachers there is just awesome. Christopher Wilson, Jim Nova, which maybe some people who have heard this show have heard of. We used to give him, Lance used to give him a ridiculous nickname every single episode. I'm guessing that Jim misses that. But no, the entire faculty there is incredible. Pittsburgh is like this hidden creative gem. There's like across multiple genres. It's a very, very hip place to learn how to be creative, and there's a lot of people in that town who are not just talking about being creative, but they're actually doing it, iterating in public, which is like the way to do it. And when you surround yourself with when you're in a town like that, it's very hard to just be theoretical about your creativity. It's like, it's a lot easier to just do it. So if you are interested in getting a degree in music, I cannot recommend the Mary Pappert School of Music anymore. There is a link in the show notes. They made a video just for Brass Junkies listeners, viewers, fans, whatever you enemies, that they'll, you know, if your tuition check doesn't bounce, they don't care if you hate the Brass Junkies. Yeah, you're all welcome. So thank you to them for their support of the show.
We brought an improvisation ensemble from the University of Michigan, performed at both Carnegie Mellon and Duquesne as part of a tour. And the openness and the enthusiasm for, and you want to talk about just like risk taking creativity, where we're inventing the pieces as we were performing them. Well attended, meaningful, wonderful conversations. I remember they set us up with host families, and I stayed with the wife of a dean of I think she said she was the widow, and he had been like the engineering dean or something, but she loved music and she wanted to be part of this. So ended up learning how to improvise some blues at her piano, kind of thing. But just a very special place, and will always have my my heart. My grandfather went to Washington and Jefferson, just south of Pittsburgh, and that's a whole other giant success story of athletics and scholarship. But my heart is there, and I'm happy to, you know, get a chance to talk about it and bounce these ideas around.
So we're contractually obligated that everyone on the show has to say something really nice about Pittsburgh. So Marcus, what do you have about Pittsburgh?
Pittsburgh is great. I got I had the opportunity to I'm very familiar with the brass roots down in Pittsburgh from Carnegie Mellon, of course.
Sure.
And they were the ensemble, kind of the first ensemble to take some of the brass stuff that I've written and bring just really bring it to life. There's a piece of music that I wrote. Well, there was an arrangement that I wrote of the Star Spangled Banner. And I had written it as a dedication to the events of 9/11, which on that same day, not in the same year, but later on in my life when I was in college, I had the unfortunate experience that we experienced of a family member passing away. And at the time, it was my only living grandmother. And so I dedicated the piece to them, to both of those events and to my grandmother on my mother's side. And I was not in a hurry to put that in front of anyone, you know, because it was just very near and dear to my heart. But when I came across the guys at the Brass Roots, I felt like I could trust that what they put forward would be something, like we were saying, that wasn't just a high quality technical performance but would actually say something. And they did a really strong job with that. And then I've trusted them with my music since then. It's been a pleasure. So even that experience by itself is enough to have really great respect for Pittsburgh. But there are obviously a bunch of colleagues who have come out of that area that I have a really great respect for as well. So, yeah.
You're I was not under the impression either from how I've gotten to know you a little bit or mutuals that were in any way flappable, but you're completely unflappable. I was just like, you must say something nice about Pittsburgh, and then you like is this incredibly heartfelt. Like I was like, what is happening? Yeah, what is he?
Well, mission accomplished.
Like, what is going on? Marcus is the new host. Yeah, I'm gonna I quit. All right. So let's talk about this consortium that you have. Just you tell us about it. The deadline is coming up. I want to say the deadline at the beginning and how they can do it, and then say it again at the end of this segment because I want people to support this thing.
Okay, perfect. Well, I appreciate it. I'm doing a consortium for brass quintet. The leaders of the consortium is Seraph Brass. It's a really big honor. I studied with Mary my first year at VCU. She was an adjunct teacher there. At the time, she was literally commuting from Naples to Richmond. It might be surprising, but commuting from Florida to Virginia is a little bit exhausting. So she did not do that for very long. But I had the pleasure of just being able to learn a lot of what I did from her. Of course, for those listening, we are hopefully familiar with Rex Richardson. And if you're not a trumpet player, shame on you for not being familiar with Rex Richardson. You need to, because he is one of those good trumpet players and nice people. And we need people to know that.
You just said, if you're not a trumpet player, shame on you. And that's what I heard. Yeah. And then you said, knowing him. And I was like, well, that's aggressive.
You don't know him, shame on you. But also, if you're not a trumpet player, shame on you. Pick up the trumpet. No, I'm kidding.
I'll pick it up and throw it.
Yeah.
You picked it up. That's we can just be grateful for that part. And on social media, we can edit out the part where you threw it. But regardless, Rex
just
toured 180.
Just show Doc holding a trumpet. Yeah, like he's anyway.
But Rex obviously tours a lot. He's an international world-class artist, and he can't be at VCU every single week to work with the students. So he had at the time I was there, he had 2 adjunct teachers my freshman year, and Mary was one of them. So I found myself just looking up to her and seeing her career unfold. She obviously later got sponsored by Yamaha. She played in the YouTube Symphony Orchestra. She founded the Chrysalis Chamber Players and of course Seraph Brass. And it's been a really great humbling opportunity to be able to be involved with this project. Because I just, seeing the things that they've done, it's been really inspiring to me. Sometimes you meet professionals after they have done a certain amount of things in your career, and it's easy to think, oh yeah, like they're professionals, but we all get to that point. So I was able to see a little bit of that. But anyway, yeah. So I'm doing this consortium with them. It is a movie score, film score style piece for brass quintet. It's also the first piece for brass quintet I've ever written. So people can stop saying, do you have any music for brass quintet? And me sadly saying, not yet, which has been the case for a while. But that's changing now. So
as is your tuba concerto.
Yeah, I need to get into writing more music for more brass instruments so that those questions don't come up, because there's no reason. I have plenty of experience writing for the instruments. There's no reason why I shouldn't write, for example, a tuba concerto or a horn concerto, etc. But yeah, so I'm really excited about the piece itself. The deadline for the consortium, obviously, as nature of a consortium, there are individuals who are able to buy into that project and be among the first to see the piece, to perform the piece if they choose to do so before it is out for sale to the general public. The due date for that is September 10th. It was previously September 1st for reasons that maybe we'll share in the bonus section of this
Oh.
episode.
Oh, look at you.
We
Look,
push
you're
it
so
back.
polished. It's irritating. Yeah.
But September 10th is when the consortium itself closes, and September 15th is when the music will be sent out to all consortium members. I mean, it's a piece that I'm proud of, which says a lot, because usually by the time I'm finished with a piece, I'm sick of it because I'm around it all the time, and I need a little bit of time away from it before I can say I'm proud of it. But I'm happy with the way that it is going. Seraph Brass is, of course, going to do the world premiere of the piece, after which it is fair game to anyone who are members of the consortium. There is a sneak peek of a clip from the piece that I've written on my website.
I was just going to say this. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah,
that's great.
Thank you. It's at msgrant music.com. And it's if you do /quintet-consortium. You can, of course, just go to my website and click on consortium. It'll take you there as well. But all the information that you need is there. Yeah, like I said, it's an exciting piece. It's one of my favorite projects, just because like I said, I look up to Mary and to Seraph and all of the things that they have done for our music world, and especially the brass world. Even when they don't overtly say it, there's been a lot of opportunities where they've empowered musicians who might otherwise feel left out. And that's something that's really important to me.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, one more time, msgrantmusic.com, which is Marcus's website. And then if you click on consortium, then yeah, you can hear the sneak peek, which is really great. And there's information, but that's September 10th. And then if you just said this, I apologize. But do you know when the music will be purchasable for the general public at large?
We're gonna we have to clarify when the specific premiere date for Seraph is gonna be, but it'll be exactly 6 months after that.
Okay.
So
great.
it's gonna be, it's gonna happen in the springtime.
Okay.
And the premiere is most likely gonna happen in September. So 6 months after September. I can't do that off the top of my head under pressure in an interview, but
March.
it'll be at that point.
Okay, great. Yeah, and of course, purchasing the music after the fact is a really great way to support composers. But paying up front is a very overt act that you can take that says, I want you to write this piece and other pieces in the future. So because as Lance likes to say, it's important to live indoors and eat food. And if we want people to continue to write or produce or be poets or whatever, then there are some boxes that have to be checked, or else a lot of that energy, you cannot be creative at 9 a.m. sharp every morning if you don't have those boxes checked. So that's really important. You just spoke about how Seraph has done a lot to empower a lot of musicians who otherwise wouldn't, experience that, which is a great way to put a lot of what they do. They're also just total badasses, and then they're badasses with a mission, which is that's also awesome. Every once in a while you'll see somebody online, it's that asks them why does there need to be a quintet with all just women? And first of all, that question is just you're telling on yourself, screaming it loud. Even the most basic answer that even someone who would ask that question out loud could understand is just noted they're total badasses. Why? There's no more questions. I mean, this is not just we have this one thing in common and we're okay. It's no, they're absolutely shredding up there. Aren't we done here? So anyway, and what they're doing is much more than that. But you would think that would shut down the questions, but 2023. This leads to talking about Diversify the Stand, which I wanted to give you a chance. That is an organization that I'm really glad exists, and you are a vice president of that. And the mission statement for Diversify the Stand that I got off the website is Diversify the Stand is dedicated to working with diverse musical voices to create accessible educational music. And I really love that at the very top of the web page, it just prominently written a question that says, "What's on your stand?" Like, just meaning like be thoughtful about it. Which I will admit, until relatively recently, I just, it was like, if it's, I would just kind of play what everybody else played, and I didn't think about that at all. Which I'm glad that I've grown there. Can you talk about your involvement with Diversify the Stand, and not asking you to defend it, but can you explain why it's so important for the world that organization exists?
Sure, absolutely. I think, regardless of anyone's perspective and where we live in current times, it is a part of the history books that not everyone has had equal representation. I mean, we know that that's irrefutable, and there are transitions that happen in the world all of the time. And one of those transitions is the never-ending overcoming of the plight of equality in the world. And it's difficult sometimes to define what that means. Equal versus fair. And you can go into a lot of ways with that conversation. But at the very least, Diversify the Stand. And this is one of the things that I'm really happy to be involved with. And I will say that the founders, Ashley Killam and Dr. Carrie Blosser, are the ones that have put together all of this, a lot of this for in many cases, I'm kind of along for the ride, as a member on the board. They propose certain things and we have a discussion and we say, yeah, that's a great idea, or we need to change this, or whatever the case may be, and approve it. Most of my role with them is, great, I think that's awesome. Yes, I agree. And if there's something that needs to be considered, I'll bring it up. But I just want to make sure that I give them credit for all of the great and amazing and incredible things that have been happening with that organization. It needs to exist because of the just because of the overall efforts that are necessary in order to give everyone a chance to be seen and to be heard. And this isn't always necessarily, I mean, like, we look at Diversify the Stand, and we talk about, you can talk about gender or ethnicity or socioeconomic background or any type of thing. But really, a big part of the conversation as well is there are literally tens of thousands of pieces of music out there for instruments that just never get played and no one ever knows that they exist. And there are composers out there trying to make a name for themselves. There are people who are just super passionate about writing for orchestra, and 99% of the orchestras just won't even consider them because they're not Mahler, And at some point in time, we have to accept the reality that if we want our career to continue to exist, we have to progress the way that the rest of the world progresses. We have to embrace things that we didn't necessarily embrace in the past. And we also have to act on knowledge that we know today that we didn't necessarily have in the past. So if we know that there is something that we supported that maybe we shouldn't be supporting anymore, to not be afraid to step up and to say that and to do that. But also, if there are things, and this is the even more important aspect of things, if there are things that should be appreciated more, things that should be validated, for lack of a better term, that that we make an effort towards making that happen as well. So I'm glad you mentioned the what's on your stand. That's a very I think that's a very powerful and important question to ask ourselves, because on one hand, great music is great music, but on the other hand, there is great music that is that are behind stones and buried deep underground, and some gems that are in caves, and sometimes you have to go out and seek them. And by the nature of a standard being a standard, it just, you don't really have to seek them. Everyone knows that they exist and everyone is recommending them. And if we ever want other music to get in that realm of becoming a standard, we have to actually put the effort towards going past the current standards and to go find that music. So like I said, I give pretty much all the credit to Ashley and Carrie for doing the things that have been done. I was involved as one of the composers on Winds of Change. I wrote the first solo, and in that book, it is an incredible book of incredible solos, and my piece is there as well. I mean, I'll let other people decide what they think about my piece, but the other 11 pieces are great, and the composers are great, and they're worth being played. And without projects like that, with organizations like Diversify the Stand, we may not be able to see those things in the light that we do. So anyway, that's why it is necessary for it to exist.
I'm just on fire listening to you, and like I want to get your take on when you bring the diverse voices to the table, into the room, give the platform, give them the microphone. Inevitably, a different perspective, a different take, a different mission, a different jargon, inevitably comes into the mix in order to dismantle an old pattern. Something new has to come into play at some point, and whether it be intentional to dismantle an old pattern or just to make room for the urgent message of the moment, of the person, of the impulse, or whatever it is. And that thing that the sameness keeps perpetuating itself, the system that just keeps turning back on itself and again. Talk about anything of addressing that, making the space for the new idea, not just in the moment, but like when you literally bring in something that questions some boundary of what we're doing here. But the only way for it to become the standard is for that to now be the next addition to the vernacular, to the repertoire, to the toolbox. Like anything, say anything about that, because that's the life, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Well, I mean, and the reality of life is that the whole nature of life is that everyone is growing and developing and changing. You know, at one point we're babies and we don't even know how to breathe, and then we start crying, and that's the process of learning how to breathe. And we learn how to walk, we learn how to talk, we learn how to do all of these things. Human beings are always changing, and so if not necessary, it should be encouraged to continue to change with everything that's around us. The world is different today than it was even 1 year ago, let alone 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, 200 years ago. And so it is, no matter what the conversation is, no matter what the context is, it is a mistake to continue to live the world with the knowledge that we had in 1800 living in 2023. And so as the world progresses, every career, everything that we do has to continue to progress as well. Of course, there are things that stay the same, but the very aspect of our understanding of the world has to change, because we have to live in the world that we live in. We can't live in the world that existed in the past in order to stay relevant, but in order to as well stay healthy and develop as human beings. That being said, obviously there's a specific focus on well, I'll put it this way. There's a lot of really great music out there for trumpet that has existed as standards for a very long time. And we have this unfortunate reality that when you play it enough, sometimes it just gets run into the ground and we start to not appreciate it for what it's worth anymore. So the bringing in of new ideas and new perspectives and new music not only helps us to appreciate that new music, but it also helps us to appreciate the history of the music that we have previously. And it helps literally
Absolutely.
every piece of repertoire that is out there. But then the other thing that you mentioned as well, obviously different backgrounds, different experiences inform how it is that we say what it is that we say as musicians. And so we will be able to write music of a quality and to connect in a fashion that was never possible previously in the world, because the situations that exist today never existed previously in the world. And so it is extremely important to include that. And to be 100% clear, we're talking about in addition to, not instead of. We're not trying to burn the Haydn concerto. We're not trying to get rid of Mahler or Rachmaninoff. But what we are trying to say is the overall progression of music needs to continue to embrace new voices. And I mean, that's not just for composers, right? That's for musicians. That's for everyone. If we don't progress and the world progresses without us, then ultimately that's how we dig our own graves as musicians. And, we can't really complain when people say that music is not a real job if we don't keep it up to date with the other real jobs that are out there. So,
wow.
Right.
Yeah, in addition to, not instead of. That's even if even if you're not really on board with the mission, which like I wish everyone was, and you know, like just progress is slow, right? But that's just incredibly practical, like in addition to, not instead of. And anybody who feels that that an organization that just as an example, an organization that's advocating for diversifying what's on the stand, that thinks that that's going to be taking away from other people, that's like a mindset where there's one pie that we're all sharing. And so if my piece is big, you know, if we split it, the three of us, we split it into thirds. But then if, you know, if Doc's like, I'm a little hungry, so I want a little bit of a bigger piece, then, you know, then you and I, Marcus, are like, wait, is that coming out of Marcus's piece, or is that coming out of my, you know, where it's like, no, you just make another pie. I mean, there's not a pie. Like everybody,
The actual way I do that is I look at Hitz and I say, that's my piece.
Yeah.
Oh,
Thanks for cutting my slice.
I learned that watching Friday.
I and I learned that I find it fascinating. I no longer have to attend every argument I'm invited to, Michael. So yeah, so I just give you the pie and then just complain about you on a podcast. So that's listened to by dozens of people. So yeah, so the joke's on you, friend. Now I want pie. It's 11 in the morning.
Me too.
I want pie. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, these are two learned people that are really like, you know, both are spitting truth, and I'm like, now I just want pie. Yeah, I don't want to talk to them anymore. Well, again, diversifythestand.org is great, and I am actually about to buy a t-shirt. I've got to like enter my, I've got it all pulled up, so I'm not going to enter my credit card info now, because I was able to do that with just a few clicks, but I was like, no, it's gonna be obvious. Actually, no, it's just show notes. Yeah, that I'm doing. Yeah.
Yeah. You were doing what? No, you show notes, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So tell me more about whatever you were just talking about. Like, yeah,
we are all 100% focused and engaged here. Yep.
Oh goodness. Yeah, again, that's just a you know, I'm glad that you know, and to Carrie and to Ashley, like, thank you for you know, and this organization came I think the timeline here is it was founded towards the end of 2020, and that was when a lot of people had a lot of ideas, and some people like followed through on them, you know, and some people like had life situations where they weren't able to. So I'm not even, you know, that sounds like I'm throwing shade at everybody, but it's like there's a lot of ideas on how to make the world a better place, and then there are some people like these two who just like ran with the ball and continue to, and that's yeah, that's what we need. That's what the world needs. So in addition to, not instead of. That's like, that would make a good t-shirt. No one would understand it really, but that, like, it's still, which means it would actually make a bad t-shirt. But okay. So we're getting short on time here. Can you talk to me a little bit about you know, you touched on Rex Richardson before. You've also studied with Kevin Maloney and with Joey Tartell and Mary. So you've had just an embarrassment of riches in the teaching department. Can you talk about like some of the lessons, whether they be trumpet, you know, lessons, takeaways from those? That it could be trumpet related, could be music related, could be life related, but just what do you think about when you think about what you learned from those four people and all the other music educators that you've had in your life?
Yeah. The biggest thing I learned, which was, I mean, there are things that you expect, right? Obviously, you expect people to, you know, if I'm with a professional trumpet teacher, I expect them to help me to become a better trumpet player. Like those, you know, there are a lot of things that are expected there. One of the things that I should have expected more, but didn't really expect until I was experiencing it with every teacher that you mentioned, it's the case here, is that how important it is to be genuine in your craft, and how important it is to just, I mean, it sounds very mushy gushy, but just be a good person. Like, don't be a jerk, right? At the end of the day, and we've mentioned this before, there are literally thousands upon thousands upon thousands of phenomenal, Joey calls them in the trumpet world, trumpet weightlifters, you know, like perfecting the craft of the instrument. But again, like, why do we do this?
Yes.
The end goal is to make music, is to say something. And if you are not a person that people want to be around, most likely they aren't going to care what you have to say. So, I mean, Mary's a really good example of someone who, you know, we listen to. Rex, Kevin, Joey. You know, I've been really fortunate to have a lot of really great teachers who have showed the human side of being a musician. And I mean, most of them say I give them too much credit, but I mean, at the end of the day, our environment is almost as important to our success as the work that we put towards it. Because the environment makes the things conducive. It's, you know, it's like the difference between planting a seed on concrete in the winter and planting a seed in a garden in the spring. You know, obviously the seed in the garden in the spring is going to grow better. And it's not because it had more potential or that it was more talented, but it was because of the environment. And I'm really grateful for that. You know, I'm grateful for the opportunity to be with those individuals who I'm now lucky enough to be able to call colleagues.
Isn't that cool thing about the music business?
It's very, very cool. Yes.
Yep. Yeah, that's neat. Well, what you were talking about with the seed, you know, when a baby is like feels safe and has like all the food and water, shelter and all that, like that's when all it has to do is just develop its brain. And there's a lot of, that's why like poverty for like when early in life is like permanently damaging, you know. And it doesn't mean that you can't overcome it, of course, but it's like and it's kind of, I'd never kind of drawn the parallel to what you just did, where when you have teachers, you know, private teachers in music who are encouraging you to develop a creative voice and are giving you the space to do that and are showing you by example all those things. It's almost like a child who just has all of the boxes checked and can just like work on learning how to speak and learning how to walk and learning how to express themselves, etc. And yeah, you definitely you earned your way to all of those studios, by the way.
Thank you.
But yeah, you hit the lottery many times over, as all three of us on this Zoom call, you know, did. Yeah, that's really important.
For sure.
Yeah.
I just was reminded of Tupac's poem though, about the rose growing in concrete, and like, you know, I absolutely appreciate connecting the right, you know, resource to the right need, and but I'd never want to overlook or somehow marginalize the alternate path. And
absolutely,
it's just like,
well said.
The thing that can get some, the struggle is at its essence what we're doing and being alive, right? Just the first thing that leaned into some light for photosynthesis or reached for something to consume. The struggle is it. And so it's like every time I'm like inside in the summertime too long, and I step outside into some 95-degree weather, I say to myself, man, that air conditioning is going to kill me. You know, I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but it's like there's just something about the yin and yang of that I think if we can continue to explore and embrace, not that it'll be permanently elusive, obviously, by the way I'm saying it, but keeping ourselves open to something that we don't even recognize as ourselves, because it always is, seems like the way forward permanently, something like that. But at the same time, yes, does it have to be such a struggle when we know what to do to help, and we know what to do, we know what's going to work, we know what's going to make someone thrive? Scarcity is a mirage. It's not real. It's like the universe is infinite, and you know, just trying to remember how to embrace that and harness that.
Man, you two are deep. I don't know. I think I need more sleep the next time I talk to you.
It's just in comparison, man.
That is one thing I will not comment on.
Thank you for rushing to my defense, Marcus. Yeah, your lack of urgency in your defense was is duly noted, sir. That's funny. I will tell you this, that the dearly beloved and departed Lance LeDuc in 200 episodes, as he wasn't my co-host, we were co-hosts, but in 200 episodes, as one of the hosts, he never referenced Friday and he never quoted Tupac. So yeah, that's that is 2 points, 2 points for Doc Nickens. So yeah, that's pretty funny. Yeah, good. All right. Last question, which is a little bit of inside baseball, but what do you do when you get frustrated in the practice room? And is that the same answer to what you do when you get frustrated when you're composing?
Yeah. So the first thing I do is I put the instrument down and I take a break. It's the change of, again, a change of environment, the change of focus, sometimes gives you that new perspective. If I come back to play the instrument, and if I come back to write music or whatever the case may be, and nothing has changed with regard to that perspective, then I put it down for good for the rest of the day and I come back. And that's come from years of not doing that. I will say that there were times when I was a student, in high school and in college, where I would sit in a room and I would say to myself, I'm not leaving this room until I achieve this goal. And what happens sometimes is when you get to that process, obviously you can practice to a point where there are diminishing returns, but it's not just the physical side of, your chops when you play as a brass musician, but it's the mental and spiritual side of things as well. You can get into this headspace where you are not going to improve no matter how hard you try. And it's something that I wish I had learned a lot sooner, because I would have been a lot more efficient with how I grew in my craft. But the way I'm able to do that today allows me to progress much quicker in certain things. So for example, there are certain skills that I have not built that I need to build and that I should have built earlier in my career. And one of those skills is as a piano player. I almost did not pass out of Jacobs School of Music. I almost did not graduate because I couldn't pass the basic competency exam for piano. It was just one of those, like, playing in an F major scale was too much for me. I could, double tongue and triple tongue, and I could teach. And at that point, I had taught dozens of students and gotten some into college and all those things, but I couldn't, play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star on the piano, and it was just too much. Couldn't do it. And in those environments in college, as I look back on it, I realized one of the main reasons that I couldn't do that was because I would sit down and I would say to myself, I'm a professional trumpet player. I should be able to do this. And so I'm going to sit down and do this. And I was placing an unfair amount of pressure on myself before even starting. I was kind of just writing my own failures into the wall, before I'd even began, because I was just telling myself that I should be better than I am, without giving myself the opportunity to grow. So the moment I stopped doing that, is interesting. The moment you stop hating yourself for no reason, you start to open up your mind to possibilities and you start to grow and become better. So after I graduated, after I was able to, survive Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, I started, learning those skills on the piano, and I've gotten incrementally better, but of course that's what you expect as musicians. It takes tens of thousands of hours. It's not, you don't sit down for 5 hours and go from nothing to professional in anything, but especially not as musicians. But I've been able to apply that to my playing, to my writing, to my teaching, to everything that I do, and it's become a lot more rewarding and a lot easier and a lot more productive of a process.
Add recording sessions to that mix too. Exactly how you're speaking about it. It's just like you just can't play it until you get it perfect. You have to stop at some point, and, and that becomes part of the process.
Yep, absolutely. And speaking specifically to the piano side of things, I mean, as a composer, obviously if I'm going to write a sonata, I need to know how to write for piano. So I need to understand how the piano actually works. Sure. I teach music theory at VCU and aural skills. I need to be able to work my way around a piano in order to do that. I can't avoid that skill. So it was one of those things that kind of I had to sit down and say, all right, what is it that it takes? And yeah, when you sit down and you're frustrated about something, and when you start beating yourself up about something, it turns your mind, it puts you in that closed-minded mindset. It doesn't matter what I think I maybe should have done in the past, or what I think I should be able to do in the present. It's, this is a skill that I need to develop. And so as a trumpet player, that's helped specifically because there was a time in my career during the pandemic where I ended up being out of practice for quite a while, which I'm sure a lot of us have experienced. And then picking up the trumpet again was a very frustrating experience. So I had the opportunity and the pleasure to implement that knowledge of, okay, cool. You know what? I'm not in a mental headspace to improve to my best amount. So let's put the instrument away for now and come back when I am in a headspace where I can do that.
Oh, that's great. That is an underrated response, which when you're frustrated, walk away. Because it feels like and I love how you put a really fine point on it too. Like, I'm not leaving this room until I get blank, and at that point you're putting this like false, you're putting, you don't get to decide that. Nobody does. I mean,
Yeah.
like it is what it is, right? And I like the diminishing returns too, where you said it's not just physical, but it's also mental and spiritual. And yeah, if you are young and listening to this, I beg you to just try and be introspective about, like, if you're really being hard on yourself. It feels like you're taking things really seriously. It's possible to take things really seriously without beating yourself up needlessly, because there are a lot of people in our business who have succeeded wildly in spite of being cruel to themselves. And I don't know a single person. There are some people who will claim it's because of it, and this is rather bold of me, but I would respectfully disagree with their own assessment. I mean, it just doesn't help. Yeah, and I too had to learn that the hard way. It's like, because I'm a knucklehead. See, I wouldn't have guessed you're a knucklehead, Marcus, but you're a knucklehead too.
It's a large club, my friend.
Right? Yeah. Well, this was wonderful. Like, really, really. This just so much. I loved your ability to give like kind of like big concepts, but also like put it into actionable, actual sound bites. And sound bites can be critical like that. There's no, like in a good way. Yeah, that was fantastic. So, and Doc, you were fine, I guess.
It's all right. Just still in the space, man.
No, this is great. I knew that that I would enjoy talking to the two of you together, and I'm glad that we made this happen. So Marcus and Doc, but Marcus is going to hang out here for the bonus episode, which is available for all Patreon patrons, and so we're going to hang out there. If you'd like to become one to help support the Brass Junkies with a lot of ongoing costs, you can go to brassjunkies.com/support. I believe I changed the URL, and it's supposed to be right in front of me, and it's not. So if that's not the URL, then you need to go to msgrantmusic.com and then click on consortium and then give him some money so that we can keep him. We can keep him. Yeah, I wanted to mention that again as well. That the deadline for that is September 10th. Is that right? Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Good. So if you're hearing this, like, please think about it and support Diversify the Stand. And if you want composers to write more music, buy their music. If you want musicians to make more albums, like, buy their albums. Ask them where you buy it will get them the most money. Just like be intentional about it, or don't be surprised when they either have to cut way back or have to go get an IT job or something and stop creating, right? Which, by the way, is not failure. That's not like there's no commentary there, but we just gotta, if we want people to be creating, you gotta support them. So I'm reminding myself of that as well here. So Marcus, this was an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much. And that is going to do it for another episode of the Brass Junkies.